who starts, who sits, and how to become the greatest of all time. This is the Fantasy G.O.A.T.
Take out the turkey, grab some turducken, because today's show is a special Thanksgiving edition of the Fantasy G.O.A.T. Mike Davis here with Jason Feinberg. Jason, happy to be spending fantasy with you, but also Thanksgiving with you as we do most years.
Yeah, absolutely. So no matter how much we go toe-to-toe during the year on our head-to-head, we still gather for family time.
Which is important stuff. Coming up on this week's show, we're talking the top storylines of 2024. Dr. Natwa is back to talk players dealing with those longer-term injuries. Then Ian Ritchie of Full-Time Fantasy is going to join us to talk the biggest surprises, good and bad, when it comes to this season. And later, Sam Argier is here to break down which teams will be dealing with the worst weather and those implications the rest of the way. And finally, a little Thanksgiving edition of this or that. But first, Jason, the holidays are a good time to reflect. A year coming to an end, Thanksgiving surrounded by family and friends. It's definitely warranting some reflection. So let's reflect on the fantasy football season thus far. And talk about some of the big storylines. So first thing that's really on my mind is the resurgence of the running back. Are we finally going back to the good old days when fantasy RBs were overvalued and more valued than even pass catchers?
This is the first time in a long time where if I have a flex position and I have a running back that's about the same as a wide receiver, I go with the running back. We didn't do that in the last few years.
I mean, there's a lot of leagues that I'm in where having the Joe Mixons, the Kyron Williams, the J.K. Dobbins, they mean a lot more than the pass catchers, which is pretty crazy. But another major storyline is Jamar Chase. Okay, this is a guy who's wide receiver one by a very wide margin. It's pretty crazy, especially knowing coming into the season in Cincinnati, he was holding out, weren't sure if he was going to play. How surprising has that been from your perspective?
I made a mistake on this one because I had the opportunity to get him in a couple leagues, and it wasn't as much about the contract holdout as it was I had him the year before, and I didn't really get the points I wanted. He didn't leave me with a lasting impression, but remember, there was no Joe Burrow. So the combination is just
it's crazy.
It's second to none.
A lot of people were worried about Burrow, his wrist, that injury. Jamar Chase was falling down boards, but he's really been the best wide receiver by a wide margin. And lastly, though, Jason, perhaps the biggest storyline to kick off the season was the injury to CMC. Going first overall in a lot of leagues, and the misinformation surrounding him. I mean, people thought he was going to play, then he's on the IR. Did you draft McCaffrey in any of your leagues?
No, and it's a good thing I didn't get the #1 pick because I probably would have taken him because because San Francisco didn't give us the information that we needed, and that's across the board because everybody took him either 1, 2, or 3, and everyone got burned. Luckily, I did get Jordan Mason in a couple leagues, but that was right off the get-go, that was the big surprise.
That was nuts. And the crazy thing is now that he's back, it's not like he's been playing that well. So we're going to be talking to Dr. Natwa. Now is the time to bring in the GOAT of fantasy football injury news, Dr. Nithin Natwa at Fantasy Docs on social media. There he is right there. Doc, great to see you.
Yeah, so Doc, looking ahead to the rest of the season, how confident are you in Isaiah Pacheco? A lot of people they've wasted not wasted a bench spot on him.
Yeah, so I'm pretty optimistic about Pacheco, but I wouldn't expect. So he's going to come back next week. It sounds like not week 12, so week 13. I'm assuming there's going to be a little bit of a split there. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't ease him into it with them having a viable running back in Hunt. But I would say for the fantasy football playoffs, I would expect him to take over the backfield and be an RB1 and possibly be a league winner coming in, just like we saw what was in Gurley those couple of seasons ago, and just ripping off a bunch of 20-plus point games and winning people their league.
Okay, now Dr. Natwa, we were just talking about CMC, a rough start for him and fantasy owners who drafted him. Is this somebody that fantasy managers can depend on in this final stretch and into the playoffs?
Yeah, I do think that CMC is going to be doing really well, actually. He's been doing pretty well. He's been doing as well as an RB1, but he hasn't been doing that CMC kind of workload where we see that 35-plus point game. But just as he gets more acclimated to gameplay and all that, he missed 8 or 9 weeks. he's going to continue to ramp up. He's got a great work ethic, and he seems like he's really set on ramping back up from his last interview as well.
Yeah, and San Francisco's not shy about giving him the ball.
Right.
A lot of people thought maybe it would be a committee for a little while, but he is definitely getting the carries. All right, let's talk about Nick Chubb. I know in one league I held on to him. I've started him every week. It hasn't been that great.
Yeah, same.
Not really awful, but really, is he going to ever be the same Nick Chubb?
Yeah, I feel bad about this report because I really do like Nick Chubb, and I think he's great. And every time I say something performance related about Nick Chubb that's not great, everyone attacks me for saying that I'm being mean. But it's nothing against him. He just has had 2 major knee surgeries, and one of them at the beginning of his career and one of them now, which is much later in his career. So it's very hard for anyone, regardless of how athletic they are, to return back to top tier playing form. And unfortunately, I think that's what we're at with Nick Chubb, and he should be able to, return back to maybe back end RB2 numbers next season, maybe even high end RB2 numbers. But I think the peak Nick Chubb that we've seen in the past is no longer there.
Yeah, I mean, and you add in a bad O-line in Cleveland. It's not a pretty situation. Dr. Notwa, listen, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We're wishing you and your family all the best. Real quickly, you're a physician, so we got to ask. Mashed potatoes or mac and cheese, which is worse for our long-term health outlook? What should we be abstaining from?
Well, I'm a sports medicine physician, so I'm all about the muscle building, and mac and cheese has got that protein in it, right?
See, that's a good answer. See,
yes.
Giving the people what we want to hear.
That's right. Now, if we talk to if we had a cardiologist on the show, it could be different.
No, of course. But you know what? This year I'm going to have my Ozempic with my cranberry sauce. So it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
You as well.
All right, guys. Well, coming up, we're talking with fantasy football expert Ian Ritchie of Full-Time Fantasy. He's always got the goods. Ritchie is next. All right, so joining us now is one of the greatest fantasy football minds on the face of the planet, Ian Ritchie of Full-Time Fantasy. Ian, this week, instead of talking waiver wire, we're going to be talking the top storylines of the season thus far. So first person that comes to mind to me, which really hurts, is Breece Hall. The running back in New York was considered the top overall pick on draft day. He's on the cover of magazines and everything. How did Breece Hall come to disappoint so many fantasy managers like myself?
Oh, we've been really surprised, actually, and your mention of the magazine cover is perfect. It's he was on the cover of our magazine with McCaffrey. So who's number one? We expected a lot more out of him this year. I think everybody did. I think with an aging quarterback and what was supposed to be a much improved offensive line, we thought he would get a lot more touches. It's been really frustrating. He's only averaging 13 and a half carries a game. 4 catches, at 13 and a half carries a game, it's really kind of fortunately, he's had enough touchdowns. He's had 9 touchdowns, but 13 and a half carries a game gets you kind of in that bust territory. Although he has been much better than a bust, he certainly hasn't lived up to that number 1 hype. It's been very frustrating.
Yeah, and another disappointment this season so far has been C.J. Stroud, the quarterback in Houston. After a great rookie season and adding so many weapons, why has Stroud regressed?
I think he's gotten a little bit of an unfair rap. He's definitely been disappointing as a fantasy quarterback compared to what his expectations were. But I think the first part of the season when he had all his weapons there and Mixon was healthy, Nico Collins was healthy, Diggs was ready to roll, Tank Dell was in there. I think that their offense looked a lot better, right? Mixon went down, lost his running game, and without a running game, he struggled. Right. But he still had Nico Collins. So he's feeding Nico Collins the ball. Then Nico goes down. Right. Without Nico, they lose the big playability. Everything is underneath. They can't take the top off the defense anymore. And so he's kind of been put in a situation where he's had to adapt to those two things. He just got Nico back. He started actually looking a little bit better here about 2 weeks ago. I think if you drafted him, you're upset. But I'll tell you, I think you could be able to count on him the rest of the season. I think with Nico back, with Mixon there, even though they're missing Diggs, I expect big things from Stroud here to finish the season, so don't give up on him quite yet.
Right, interesting.
Good.
I was giving up on him. All right, we don't want to be too depressing, Ian. It is the holidays, so let's bring some positivity into this. Brock Bowers has been one of the most pleasant surprises. Did you see this coming?
Early on, I didn't see it coming at all. there was a lot of questions at quarterback for the Las Vegas team. They, between Minshew and O'Connell, nobody knew who was going to get that nod. And there was more mouths to feed. I mean, they had Jacoby Myers, they had Devontae Adams. Losing Devontae put Las Vegas in a situation where they are just going to feed that rookie. When you say, did I see it coming? He's been amazing, and he has been far and away the best tight end, the most reliable tight end. But in the weeks leading up to the start of the season, I spent a lot of time in Las Vegas. I was on your show. I was on multiple shows, and I was on with a lot of the personalities in town that cover the. And I have never heard such a unanimous verdict of he was going to be so successful this season. I have never heard such excitement from people, and it really got me on the Brock Bowers train a little late. I jumped on late. I wish I had jumped on earlier, but he's great. He's going to be great for the city of Las Vegas. He's really going to be a guy they can build around on that offense and really change that team. So I'm really excited to see where he ends up. And, we heard rumors that he was lining up as fullback in the preseason. He's done it a few times during the season, but we'll see here toward the end of the year if he gets any carries from the backfield down at the goal line.
Listen, choo-choo. We're all on that Bowers train. Thank you, Ian. Wishing you and your family a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks again.
And we are reaching the home stretch of the fantasy season, and we're looking at some warm weather down in Florida for those outdoor games in December. But what about the cold weather climate outdoor games? We'll let you know what to look out for as we reach the end of the season. All coming up in your GOATcast.
All right, Jason, it's time to bring in one of the most suave men we know. Meteorologist Sam Argier is here for a special GOATcast. Sam, as we look towards the fantasy football playoffs, what are some of the top weather implications we should keep top of mind?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying I'm suave, Mike. That's much appreciated. Back at you and Jason as well, both dapper gentlemen over on the couch. Of course, when we start thinking about later on in the season, we're approaching December. This is the time of year. Hopefully your team is going to the fantasy playoffs because you've been watching this show. The outdoor games, the biggest concern. And this is a product from the Climate Prediction Center. This looks at a lot of meteorological parameters and shows us where we're leaning in terms of warmer, colder, wetter, or drier. So we'll start with the temperatures, and we're trending warmer for a good swath of the country, especially for the southern tier of the country. Now, of course, Dallas, Houston, indoor games there, but the implications will be down in Florida. Some of those December games could still be warmer than average. Now, when it comes to precipitation, a lot of the southern tier, once again, trending drier than average. So again, down in Florida, that'll be the bigger impact. One area we'll be watching, the Pacific Northwest. Now, Seattle, infamous for the rain. They've been seeing quite a few storms already this season. So some of those games in Seattle could certainly trend wetter than average. But you see a good portion of the country, especially where there are outdoor stadiums, there's really no brown, no green, and that means equal chances for the Midwest and the Northeast. So that essentially just means that equal chances for wetter, drier, or warmer or cooler than average. So it really means anything goes in these cities. So I would say if you're some of your key players, play outdoors. Chicago, Green Bay, New York, Philly, Ohio as well. Cincinnati and Cleveland as well will be hosting a lot of games. Pittsburgh, of course. These are all cities that you're going to want to keep an eye on as we go through December, especially as we get into the playoffs. Right. That can limit production if you get really cold weather, you get snow on the field. All things to consider. And I got a list, and I actually highlighted some of the games I'm keeping an eye on.
Let's see.
There's quite a few. Well, week 14, which will be December 8th, we've got New York hosting New Orleans, Philly's hosting Carolina, Pittsburgh's hosting Cleveland. That should be good. Yeah. Week 15, we've got a Thursday night in San Francisco. And I should mention San Francisco, we know the weather there can change quite a bit. Yep. I've got personal interest because I'm flying to Seattle for the Sunday night game against Green Bay.
Gotcha.
That'd be huge.
It's the Christmas gift for my son. He's a big Seattle fan, so we're going to keep an eye on that.
Bomb cyclones.
They've already been hit by a bomb cyclone. Right. There could be more. He's hoping for snow because Seattle doesn't see. I used to do weather in Seattle. Yeah. Known for rain. They don't get a ton of snow, but when they do get snow, like the whole city shuts down because it's all built on a hill. So it'll be exciting. I really think this final stretch as we go through December, especially for those areas, whenever you see equal chances, it really does mean anything could go.
You know, the only player I think I trust in no matter what the weather is, and I don't have him at all, is Josh Allen.
Yes.
He is like built for that weather.
100%.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, he's weatherproof.
Yeah. Playing in Buffalo, it'll do it to you.
Yeah. Wyoming and then Buffalo.
Yeah, it toughens you up real quick.
Well, Sam, thank you for that great Go-Cast. Guys, after a short break, we'll be right back with some more Fantasy Go. Okay, so Jason, the holiday season is supposed to bring the holiday spirit with it. Christmas, one should feel merry, right? And for Thanksgiving, one should feel thankful. Well, right now we're going to be bringing some gratitude to fantasy football. So Jason, who are you thankful to this fantasy football season?
Well, it has to be somebody that I have on a team, because or else I probably wouldn't be thankful. I'd probably be hateful against the fact that he scored. And so I have Saquon Barkley now in 3 leagues. He did have a dud the other few weeks ago, but overall, I got to say he is the most thankful player I have. So I got to go with Saquon Barkley from Philadelphia.
I'm thankful, and I don't even have him.
Yeah.
I am from Philadelphia, so I love him very much. We're all thankful for that, and we're thankful for that hurdle, that beautiful hurdle.
Oh, that was one of the best plays of the season.
Maybe
the best, yeah.
All right, I'm thankful for Chris Boswell, the kicker in Pittsburgh, who's got more fantasy points than Tyreek Hill, than DK Metcalf, than Cooper Kupp, than Jonathan Taylor. All these guys have less points than the kicker out in Pittsburgh, and everybody's always like, kickers, draft them last. Well, this guy is consistent. He's been hitting field goals. He only missed 1 field goal all season long. It was from 62 yards out. So the guy is a stud. He got me 25 points one week. I mean, he's a bona fide stud. So I am grateful for Chris Boswell in season 10.
Yeah.
He's doing it.
I mean, things, everything's cyclical, and in a lot of positions, it happens quicker than other positions, like kicker. We've been riding Justin Tucker for years.
Of course.
Now we're starting to see some cracks.
In a year where kicking hasn't been so consistent, Chris Boswell has. So it's a beautiful thing. And of course, Jason, listen, we're not above being hateful or being disappointed in people or ungrateful. So who are we not grateful for this year?
Well, to keep with the same storyline, as much as I am thankful for Saquon Barkley, just imagine how much more he could do if it wasn't for Nick stinking Sirianni. So I'm going with the head coach of Philadelphia. You probably know why. When the ball is anywhere close to the 1 yard line, to the end zone, it's going to be Jalen Hurts.
It's true.
And even Jalen Hurts looks at Saquon Barkley and he's like, I know, man, I'm sorry.
I mean, it really is a great point you bring up, Jason.
Yeah.
And this could be on Sports Talk Radio right now in Philly, but think about it from a fantasy football perspective. How many more points would Saquon have if they just handed him the ball rather than do the tush push?
Yeah. Luckily, lately they've gotten away with running Barkley up the middle, which is eventually going to lead to Hurts. Whereas when they do kind of toss him the ball, he goes a little bit, what would it be, east and west before north and south.
Right.
He has more room, and sometimes he can just get it in himself.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
For me, I just want to throw in my ungrateful. I'm going to say, I mean, listen, I think C.J. Stroud, as a guy who drafted this guy, it's just super disappointing because after the rookie season he had where he looked like the Mashiach, this guy looked like he was going to be a stud. He got all these weapons, Diggs, and he just hasn't been performing. So that is my ungrateful guy. But guys, coming up after the break, we're sticking with this theme of Thanksgiving. A Thanksgiving edition of This or That is after the break.
This is the Fantasy GOAT.
Welcome back to the Fantasy GOAT, a special Thanksgiving edition of the GOAT for you. So naturally, we're going to do a Thanksgiving edition of This or That. So right off the bat, we got a big showdown, Jason. Stuffing or mashed potatoes, where do you stand?
Well, 364 days out of the year, I would go with mashed potatoes, but on Thanksgiving, it's got to be stuffing. Love the stuffing.
What is stuffing? You know, that's what I mean, what are they, croutons? I don't even know what stuffing is. So I'm a mashed potatoes guy. Do you actually know what stuffing is?
No, I don't. I do think croutons might have something to do with it, but I'm also known for not stepping into the kitchen.
Okay.
So I would not know.
I have no clue. I think it has something to do with croutons.
I think so.
Come on, I'd rather have mashed potatoes. All right, especially with that gravy. Come on.
Yeah.
Next up, we got a pie showdown. Pecan pie or pumpkin pie? This is a tough one for me.
It is, but I don't like pecans. So this is an easy one for me, and I do like pumpkin. So pumpkin pie for me, 100% all the way.
I love pumpkin pie.
Okay.
If this pecan pie has chocolate chips in it, that is the X factor. That's the deal breaker. So if it's pecan chocolate chip pie, then I'm going pecan pie, and I'm gonna just, because listen, we're playing around anyway, I'm just gonna assume there's gonna be bountiful chocolate chips in there.
You're going to be at my brother's house.
Yes.
My sister-in-law is cooking. I would be bold enough, if I were you, to make that phone call. Yeah, to request
They're being so generous
chips.
already. If it was pumpkin pie or pecan without the chocolate
probably
chips,
have both.
I'd be fine.
Yeah.
All right, last up in this Thanksgiving edition of This or That, big one here. Canned cranberry sauce or homemade. And in the back office, Jason, we were discussing this.
Yes.
It's kind of like a fart noise you make. It's like,
that's for what?
The can
cranberry,
Yes.
or just when you flop?
Right.
Okay.
You know, like cutting it out, it kind of makes a farting noise.
Yeah.
Does it? Yeah, I don't know.
Which I think everybody can relate to.
So what do you like? Do you like the canned cranberry or just homemade?
You know what? My initial thought was homemade, but after I thought about it some more,
With the fart.
yeah, I got to go with the fart sound. I got to go with the canned cranberry sauce, but also because, again, like you were mentioning, the X factor. There is an X factor in homemade. You don't know who's making the homemade, whereas you do know what you're getting in a can.
That's true. It's true. Honestly, I don't like cranberry anything.
Yeah.
I just don't want any cranberry juice or any of that.
Really?
I'm not into it. It can be. I want it off my plate. You know, I get a little.
Maybe you had a bad
OCD.
experience with a Welch's commercial. Those kids were kind of weird.
I always wanted to be in that cranberry thing. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, guys.
Bye.